Welcome to Modern Financial Wellness, the podcast dedicated to helping you feel better about your finances. I'm your host, Jim Grace, and I'll be your guide as we discuss the psychology of money and explore the emotional aspects that shape our financial decisions and how we feel about them. A quick note before we start, although I do hope that you find the information on this show to be helpful, in no way are any of these discussions to be taken as specific financial advice. Please do your own research and talk to your own advisors, especially when making important financial decisions. So Sarah Reiff-Hekking, so good to see you again. Thank you for joining us on Modern Financial Wellness. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we've gotten to know each other a little bit over the past several months or so, and we've had longer conversations about time management in your work. But for those that aren't familiar, do you want to just take a quick second and tell people who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my company is True Focus Coaching, and I love to help high performers, entrepreneurs, and professionals get a grip on their time so they can get to that next level in their business and their life. So I like to help people, and I love, I've been doing this for a long time now. I really help people get the right stuff done during their workday so that they can build their business, so they can increase their revenue, and then also have the time that they want to do the things outside of work. So it's really about the whole life, but we often do focus on the workday because that's what a lot of people are challenged with.
Right. So since we last spoke in one of these interviews, I actually took one of your programs, the Jumpstart Your Productivity online course. So I wanted to touch base with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to unpack a few things because I am fascinated with kind of the overlap of your work and others and how that intersects with financial well-being, which is what this show and conversations are about. So thank you for taking the time and letting me pick your brain a little bit and, make some observations about what I learned and see if we can connect some dots to financial wellness, if you will. The first thing I was really curious to talk to you about is mindfulness. So obviously I was taking a productivity time management course, and I expected to get a lot of to-do list coaching and calendar management. And there are a lot of technical aspects built into your work. But the first thing that I was struck with was you open up with having a growth mindset. And you talk a lot about non-judgmental awareness. So throughout the program, I kept getting a feeling or a sense that mindfulness was built in to your process and informed your work. And then in one of the group sessions, I think it was just kind of mentioned in passing that you had done some work with Jon Kabat-Zinn. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on mindfulness. And I don't want to put that on your work if it wasn't intentional, but that's what I got out of it. So I'm just kind of curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I will say that I use mindfulness approaches. It's, as you know, it's not, I don't know, maybe it felt obvious to you, but I don't have people meditate in my programs. I recommend meditation. I recommend stress management approaches. And often when we're taking a look at why we're spending our time in ways we want to or not, stress and being present has a lot to do with that. So, and also I was on faculty with Jon Kabat-Zinn at UMass Memorial way back in the day. And I did research, on his program in regards to blood pressure management in my former research clinical psychology life. And I came up in the clinical psychology world just as what we knew about managing anxiety and our thoughts related to anxiety and depression was sort of the science there was meeting the science of mindfulness and meditation.
And just real quick for people who aren't as familiar, Jon Kabat-Zinn is, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's really kind of credited with bringing mindfulness to the West in a way that was separated from kind of the religious connotations of it and taking more of a scientific approach. Is that fair?
Yes, that's absolutely fair. He's really the grandfather of that approach. He's been around for a long time, and really was the pioneer in terms of teaching what we now call mindfulness approaches. And he did it, it was very avant-garde. He did it in a medical center at a time when we weren't talking about mind body stuff. That was
Mm-hmm.
not, it was felt very much on the fringe.
Mm.
So the reason, so he needs to be credited with the fact that now we talk about mindfulness like it's, chicken soup.
Right.
And that comes from, by and large, from his work and his team that used to be at UMass Memorial at the Center for
That's
Mindfulness.
that's very cool. And that's what really is fascinating to me about these conversations. So we'll get into it a little bit more, but and other guests of this show have been mindfulness meditation coaches. And so,
Oh,
again,
got
when
it.
I'm taking a time management productivity program, you expect a lot of the technical expertise about how to get things done, which you do tackle. But I'm just fascinated in that overlap of thinking about ourselves as human beings, and that mind body approach to our day to day can be really useful. So that was cool to see.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring it in to what I do is because at the crux of managing your time is, are you aware that you're in the present moment? Are you aware that you have control over the present moment? And how are you choosing to be in the present moment? And we
Mm,
get to that from many different ways. There's many different approaches to get there. And just noticing that we do have control in the present moment, and we have an ability to shift how we're approaching the present moment, makes a big difference. So I do have some tools that are really very highly draw on mindfulness,
hmm
my own spin on how to do that in the moment related to managing your day and your time. And it's very, very effective. And so that's why you felt it, because at the base of what I do is the intersection of science and art, right?
right.
So I have taken, very effective approaches that we know in the clinical science help people change their behavior, help people change behavior related to time and
Mm,
other tools, and put them in various different toolkits for my
right.
students.
Right. And there's so much overlap in the world of personal finance. Being aware and present of how you're managing your moments and your time feels very similar to me when we think about things like budgeting. Budgeting is kind of the boogeyman that we like to beat up, I think, often, but
Yes.
it's applicable where just being non-judgmentally aware, and I've learned this from, again, past guests and mindfulness meditation coaches, of how we're spending money similarly to how we're spending time. There's so much similarity there, and just pausing and studying your day, tracking your time, tracking your expenses. It's a similar kind of process, which was really interesting as I went through your program. The other thing you talk about, mind body kind of connection and who we are, you talk a lot about taking care of yourself. So one
Mhm.
of the recommendations and the instructions is to get a good night's sleep, eat good food, and exercise, or paraphrasing obviously, but I guess that's just a continuation of what you just described.
Well, it is a continuation. I also think that people underestimate how doing those things affects how you're thinking and you're feeling.
Mm,
And I learned early on in my life, because I have a body that's really sensitive to the type of food that I put into it. So I was sort of, preaching the whole foods approach, and got involved in the whole foods approach before it was the big thing that is today. Now we have the data to show it.
right.
Now we have, the disease prevention and disease reversal data that shows us that when you eat a whole foods diet, and it doesn't have to be funky whole foods, just, get fruits and vegetables in your diet, eat whole grains, eat, beans and legumes, eat nuts, right? So things that you can readily find in the grocery store that are easily attainable and that fuel our bodies in different ways. And what I know to be true for myself and for many of my clients is that we underestimate these small shifts in energy that are really affected by whether we got a good night's sleep,
Mm,
whether we have eaten regularly and food that's actually going to fuel us, or food that's going to, spike our sugar and then drop our blood sugar. And a lot of anxiety and crankiness,
mm.
frankly, is related to those drops in blood sugar
How do
and
you
not having it eaten for a long period of time.
how does that present itself with the clients that you work with? How do you spot that, or how might we spot that in ourselves? Because similarly to our last, point about being present and being aware, I feel like we all have a tendency to just kind of get through our day and
Mm.
react to what needs to be done, the next email that comes through. And I guess it, obviously plays into what we eat and when we go to bed and those things. But is there any like tip or trick that we might be able to highlight for folks to get that pause and awareness and just understand what they're doing with their body and how that relates to their time?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I have people do before they come into any of my programs is just start to notice what they're doing when they're feeling productive and what they're doing when they're feeling most productive and what they're doing when they're feeling least productive, because that can give us some clues. And then I would also ask yourselves, do you eat healthy food regularly? And if you don't know what healthy is, then talk to somebody who can help you with that conversation. And I also think notice in your day when you're not feeling good, when your energy's, in the toilet, right? It's really low. Or you're feeling like this is that place. This is, I love feeling like this. This is awesome. Notice what are the circumstances and the behaviors that get you there. So, I often will work with people that say, wow, mid afternoon, I have a really hard time doing anything productive, right? My energy just crashes. And for some people it's mid-afternoon. For you it might be a different time of day, but notice when that crash happens. And my first question is, all right, we all sort of biologically have a time in the day where our energy is low. So sometimes we just need to honor that. Yeah, 3 o'clock, it's not best for me to do my best thinking. It is when my energy is low. So let me put in something, so another activity there that I can get done easily, but
Mm-hmm.
isn't going to require really high powered thinking that I can do much more easily at a different time of day. Right.
Right. Right. Again,
Um,
awareness of just our rhythms and cycles of our own body, right? Doesn't even have to be a dramatic change in your diet, just being aware of who you are as a
yes.
human
Yeah.
being
So,
and fitting in the right activities at the right time.
yeah. So start to notice that. And then, if there is a time of day where you're like, wow, or the day when you're like, geez, can't think now, this is not usual. It's worse than usual. Then ask yourself, there's some obvious things. Is it like 2 hours after you just ate a huge refined carbohydrate, ridden meal? Okay, your blood sugar is dropping. Your brain isn't going to function best then. Or is it, you've been drinking coffee steadily all morning and then at, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're falling off a caffeine cliff, right?
Very,
And your body,
very guilty of that.
right, right. I
Yeah.
get it. I love
Yeah.
coffee. It's one of my favorite things in the world. And I am conscious about how I use it and the habits that I get into.
Mm,
Right. So sometimes we
mm,
don't even know the habits. And you were talking earlier about, being reactive to your environment. And I think that we get into this place where we are being reactive and we're showing up and we're doing things in a habitual reactive way. And so some of the subtleties of how to, and this is, the work that I love to do with high performers, high producers in whatever, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a realtor, whether you're a coach or a consultant. This is the subtle place where you can really make a big difference in terms of how you're using those few moments during your day
mm,
that push things forward instead of make you feel like you're behind.
mm. Right.
And when you notice those ups and downs in energy, we can really make a difference in terms of how we sequence things. And sometimes the things we sequence are things like sleep and physical activity, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Again, it struck me as such an obvious connection between the world that you're in and managing energy and time and what we do, which is managing finances. And one of the things
Yeah.
that came up in your program was meal prep specifically. And I know in working with the clients that I work with that besides a mortgage or childcare, food costs is probably one of the biggest expenses that most households have in their budget on a month to month basis. And I know I can speak to myself personally. If I don't set aside specific time of the week to make sure that I have the right groceries in the refrigerator. And then probably more importantly, set aside time to actually prepare meals ahead of time or schedule when I'll be cooking, because that I like to cook and like to cook. When I started to date my then girlfriend, she's now my wife, and I've just defaulted to the cook in the house.
You're
She
the
let
cook.
me have
Yeah.
that one. Right. But I know that when I don't put in that time, or we're away for the weekend and I don't get the groceries done on Sunday and I don't have the meal prep set aside for the beginning of the week, it has this like cascading effect where I'm spending more money on food because I'm buying it on the run, and I'm eating poorly. And by the end of the week, I'm more tired, have less energy. I feel like I've gotten less done. I'm not in control and productively moving things forward. I'm just reacting. So I'm hungry. I got to go and run and grab and, spend some more money. And it's just, it all stems from that lack of preparedness and scheduling of meal prep. And it's funny that meal prep became kind of this central focus in my brain at a moment in your program, but it's again, I think a great example of the overlap between, our two worlds.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we do in terms of how we manage our time that cause us to spend money when we don't necessarily need to, or that we're trading money for time,
Mm,
right? So I would say a lot of food, even though we don't think about it this way, is trading money for time sometimes. Not always, because I know that you can make a healthy meal in less time than it takes you to go to a restaurant, or sometimes even drive through takeout. But
hmm
this is where the habit of what you do every day and how you get your food can be very strong. And even, we're just not aware of it, right?
mm,
So, in the 45 minutes that it takes you to go out and go through the drive-through and pick up the food and come back and sit at your desk with it and eat at your
hmm
desk, you could just as easily probably put together a quick healthy meal that you
hmm
had if you had the right ingredients in your refrigerator, right?
right.
And then you go the next level if you plan ahead, and you make one big pot of something or two or three big pots of something. Then you have lunches for the week that are
hmm
grab and go and takes you even less time.
right.
So, and I think that analogy as you said, goes very closely with spending money and wild card time and wild
Right.
card money and all of those conversations that are very similar that we've had.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And going back to the whole point about your whole body, if I'm tired, I crave fatty food. I love Chinese food on
Yes.
Sunday night when we've had a long, busy weekend. That's where my body wants some stuff that's bad for me. But I know if I indulge that craving, I'm going to have less energy, potentially get less stuff done. So again, interesting overlaps of the two, fields of work. And that gets me into my thoughts on overwhelm and procrastination and not getting things done. It kind of leads me to that place again with a past guest. We talked to Moira Summers, who's a clinical neuropsychologist, about why people don't get things done financially, don't take care of financial tasks. And it turns out that two of the three biggest reasons, besides just forgetting and being a human being, which is why you need a to-do list and all the things that you coach in your program, right? The technical things
Right.
of remembering to get things done. But overwhelm and procrastination come from kind of the emotional side of our lives, right? And when I find when I'm not in control of my calendar and managing how I feel, it creates this almost kind of negative feedback loop where I'm just in this natural cycle of not feeling my best, not getting things done. So I have a tendency to just say, we'll worry about that later. So I just feel like there's so much opportunity for us to take better care of ourselves and our time, which is going to free up the space for us to get things done financially or otherwise.
Yeah, and it helps, calm the emotions that can spike on top of whatever is already underlining your difficulty managing your finances, right?
hmm hmm
So, if you have I'm not worthy of a certain amount of income, or there's some family belief or cultural belief about the level of income that you are allowed to have or how money gets managed, period. This is just how we do it. And you want to learn different skills for that. It helps if you're coming in not already feeling exhausted, anxious, or depressed, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or completely shut down. So when we're managing, our bodies in general, we can then come in and say, okay, I know I procrastinate on updating, my finances, but I'm coming in rested, and I'm making a choice right now to do something that feels hard, and I can do that because I'm rested.
Right. And
Right?
that you kick off, again, I mentioned you kick off the program with thinking about an open growth mindset. So being prepared mentally and physically to tackle what might be challenging, feel a little bit overwhelming, whether it's taking control of your calendar or taking control of your budget, just being more fully prepared to tackle the challenge is probably the best, starting point for both things.
Yeah, and so you bring up the growth mindset again, and this is a mindset that's been well researched by a woman named Carol Dweck. She's got a great book called Mindset, and she compares the growth mindset to the fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is this notion that you're born with skills and talents, and you can practice and get a little bit better. But basically, if you don't have it, right? So if you're not a good financial manager, you haven't been brought up in a family that teaches you how to be a good financial manager, you're not going to be it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're born with it or you're not. Compared to the growth mindset, which is this notion that anything you practice, you can get better at.
Mm-hmm.
And when she takes a look at different groups and she puts them into people that have the growth mindset or the fixed mindset, whether it's entrepreneurs, Olympic athletes, girls learning math, the groups that have the fixed mindset are much more successful in whatever they're working on.
Growth mindset.
Yeah, growth. Oh, did I say fixed? Growth mindset.
You said fixed. Yeah, just wanted to clarify.
Growth mindset.
I knew what you meant, but yeah, I don't want anybody to misunderstand. Yep.
Yes. So the growth mindset, and it's this notion that anything you practice, you can get better at, and that mistakes are helpful. Making an error teaches you something. So instead of, oh no, I'm not perfect, I made an error, right? I ate out too much this week. I went over my budget for food. Isn't that interesting? Why this week did I go over my budget for food? I made a mistake. Let me learn from that mistake. How could I stay within the budget next week?
Yeah. And again, it ties in with non-judgmental awareness, right? Not beating ourselves up, not judging each other if we're in a partnered relationship and judging the other person for where they spent money. I think we like to victimize or villainize, going out to Starbucks. And it's like, look, this isn't the point. We're just trying to be aware of where we're spending our money, or in your case, spending our time, so that we can learn from it and grow and have that growth mindset and get better, over time, one step at a time.
And I think the other point of overlap here that I'm thinking that just came to me, Jim, my brain. I clearly have not had enough caffeine this morning,
it's
or
all
whatever,
good.
but
Yeah.
I'm here with you. So the thing here, Jim, that I think is just hitting me is there's this big overlap of the function of what you're doing, right? Between time management and also money management. So what's the function of going to Starbucks to get your coffee, right? It could be that you really want coffee and you really like Starbucks coffee, and that's the only place you want your coffee. It could be that it's the habit of where you get your coffee, right? And it could be that I like to get out of my home office and see people out in the world.
Right. And that's valuable. I'm glad you brought this up and made this connection, because that's another thing that I was thinking about as I was going through the program. You bring up, and this is applicable to my world, having a commute or knowing when you're going to work, right? And having that defined. And I thought about my own life post-COVID that's turned into this weird hybrid work from home. Sometimes I'm in an office, but mostly I'm home and my wife's here. I need a little bit of time in the morning, and I think that a lot of people do. So again, think we tend to villainize the coffee run from a financial perspective. But part of me just feels like, man, if that's the time in the day that you're setting yourself up, you're seeing people, you're getting your caffeine, you're feeling energized and starting your day the right way, then gosh, is that, $4 or $5, whatever it is, that might be worthwhile and have a place in your budget, and it might be worth your time, right? If it's managed well and it's a good habit that is empowering or a tool for you that you can bring into the day.
Yeah, so I think about that sometimes in terms of paying rent, right? So if you're not paying rent for your office space, and one of the things that helps you thrive in your home office is to get out and get a cup of coffee at your local shop, say hello to some people, maybe energize yourself with, other people around you, and get your body moving, right? You have to get up and get in the car, move, whatever, walk down to the coffee shop. If that is what wakes you up and gets you ready for work, that's great. But let's actually categorize it in a way that makes sense and ask ourselves, is it useful? Is it a meaningful use of our time? And sometimes the answer is overwhelmingly yes. Yes. Right?
Yeah.
We do have a commute, even when it's to the extra bedroom, if that's where our office is. So what is the commute? The function of the commute often is to wake us up and get us energized.
Right. Yeah, I think of my wife. What we noticed in thinking about how she was spending her time is she was spending all of her time in the house because she works from home 100%. She's fully remote. And I originally didn't love that she was spending, one afternoon a week going out and buying lunch and sitting there with her computer and doing work. But just like you described, in the grand scheme of things, that's well worth the cost to get her off the property and get her moving and in a different environment that it energizes her to continue, to do the things she needs to do throughout the week. So it's well worth the time, and it serves her, right, for her purposes. But it gets back again to just being aware. What are the things that we're doing habitually throughout our day, and are they serving us, or do we need to kind of reflect and change things up? So,
well, and I think the other thing here, James, that brings together the time management approach that I use and the productivity management approach that I use and financial management is like, what are your goals? So, all of this is just an interesting conversation unless you're like, what are your goals? So if you have a goal to save so much money and you realize that, hey, if I go out and I eat my lunch out, I actually make more money when I do that because I'm more energized. I run into people that maybe I end up working with or that give me good ideas. Then you're talking about a different conversation. So a lot of this stuff can't just happen in a vacuum like you were talking about, Starbucks.
That's a great point, and probably worthwhile clicking into a little bit. I personally feel like budgeting or the exercise of bookkeeping personally, especially if you're in a partnered relationship, that can be fairly useless unless you've identified what your meaningful goals are. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? What is our money for? If you haven't had that conversation, then it becomes really difficult to affect any meaningful change in how you're spending money because it's not aligned to what you claim to be important to you or what you're trying to accomplish. And it's a similar idea came to the forefront, and I think we talked about it throughout the program. That was meaningful to me is your description and emphasis on what are your meaningful goals. I actually have that built into my calendar on Mondays, which is to revisit what are my meaningful goals? What am I trying to actually accomplish here? Because I have so much to do, I tend to find myself in this routine of just responding to the emails that come up. Or if there's a LinkedIn notification, it's just like what bell goes off that can bring me to the next thing to do rather than proactively deciding what I'm going to work on. And it's just, again, another great connection between the world of personal finance and productivity and time, where what's important to us, right? Spending some time defining what's meaningful to us is really critical in both managing your money and managing your time.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was having a conversation with family members who, and this, one family member and I had similar experiences where we'd been with friends recently that went into a jewelry store and spent more money than we would ourselves on beautiful jewelry, beautiful jewelry. And I was able to just be with my friend and be like, yep, she loves to spend her money on that stuff. That is worth it for her. Mm-hmm. And it's part of how she chooses to spend her money in general. Mm-hmm. Right now, I don't buy expensive jewelry, but I have hobbies that I put that money into, right? It's more of an experience for me. For her, the experience of wearing the jewels is awesome. And that's
Hmm.
where she wants to put the money,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, it's interesting the judgment that comes in place, whether it's, how many, jewels do you need, right?
Right.
Or how much money do you put into your hobby? Or how much money do you want to use eating out? It
Right.
really depends on what are your
Yeah.
long-term goals and
Yeah. And that's
what is that money in service of,
right. Right. And
right?
again, it gets me back to, Starbucks. And I think of my wife, who's a working mother, or the working mothers that I work with, that, you see this, well, if you just, add up how much coffee you drink, how much you spend on coffee per week. And if you just invested that money, it's like, are we supposed to tell people who need that energy, have that experience to get out and get themselves going, and that serves them? Are we supposed to tell these people to stop drinking coffee? Like, what are we doing here?
Right, right.
So, so yeah, it's another, great overlap. I think this idea of meaningful goals, what we're trying to accomplish, what's important to us. That's not our job to tell people where to spend their money or their time, right? If it's meaningful to them. And I thought that was a great connection to be made between the work that we do. So obviously spending time thinking about what is meaningful to us, taking care of ourselves as people, in our bodies, in our mind, being aware, and some of those mindfulness components. Did I miss anything? Is there anything that you think of the overlap between time management and financial management that we should touch on real quick?
I think there's this piece of wild card time or wild
Mm,
card money that I think really, really is very common in both areas and is hard for people to manage.
mm,
So if we talk about it in terms of finances, we think about those big wild card expenses that happen annually, like, I don't know, we had our water heater go out, or our refrigerator. This was great. Our refrigerator a day before vacation, right? You need to buy something that you haven't necessarily been planning for, but you can't go without, and you need to replace it. So it needs to happen.
right,
So I think about that in terms of a wild card expense. Now, I know on the financial planning piece that if you look at your wild card expenses throughout the year, it from year to year, it tends to be relatively stable. We need to set
right,
aside whatever, 6 grand, 10 grand, 30 grand, whatever, for the depending on the property you own and your business, whatever, for wild card expenses, right?
right. And I would just add to that as well. I just talked to a reporter about this. Actually, she's doing a piece on how to control impulse spending in the summertime when fun things come up.
Oh, I
And
love that.
I was thinking about this. It's not only the water heater and things are going to have to be replaced at your home that you're going to have to pay for, but your friends are also going to ask you to go away for the weekend, or somebody's
Yeah.
going to get tickets to a concert or a game. And it's going to be fun stuff that we can go out and do, as we look forward to the summer. And we know it's going to happen, but you're right, people don't do a good job of planning for that and working that into the budget. We know exactly what the mortgage and the rent is, we know what our car payment is, we know what our utilities bills are going to be. It's all this other stuff that we don't take into account. And it's similarly what I learned from you on our calendar. There's going to be stuff that comes up that we either need to take care of, or we're going to find ourselves with free time. And how do we fill that time, right? And managing and planning for that.
Yeah, yeah. So I call that wild card time, and some of us have more of it than others. But we all have, things that happen in our day that we don't plan, we can't predict. But what we can predict is, in general, how much time during our day gets used for those wild card things, right? Just like annually, you can predict in general, year after year, how much time you want to or you do end up spending on the wild card expenses, whether it's your water heater or that vacation that you can't resist that you haven't budgeted, right?
Right,
So
right,
you can start to set aside that time. And likewise, you can set aside the time, or you set aside the money, you can set aside the time in your day, right? And then if the wild card for the wild card thing, you hold it. Say you always know you spend an hour talking to colleagues, or a client calls and you're not sure when that's going to be. So set aside an hour in your day And then if it's not happening at that hour, you move another activity in there that's meaningful and important. Just like if you set aside, $5,000 for a family vacation and it doesn't happen, you're going to use that $5,000 for something else that feels meaningful and important.
Right.
And we forget that we have control over that planning because it feels so infrequent that those things happen. But it is very, very similar.
Right. There's so much. I was really impressed with the way that the program was put together. I got a lot out of it. And we could talk about some of the technical aspects maybe another time, but just the kind of the human side. I know that I feel better when I'm in more control of what I'm eating, how I'm feeling physically, how I'm managing my time. And I know that you're better prepared to make better financial decisions and actually get things done and move things forward when you're controlling your time. So I just think it's worthwhile. I appreciate you taking the time to come on and kind of unpack some of these things with me, because I think it's worthwhile for people to consider their calendar and their time management when they're also concerned about their financial well-being and how they're feeling in general. Because again, if we know that one of the reasons why people don't get things done financially or take care of financial tasks is they're just feeling overwhelmed, right? Or there's this emotion, so they're going to procrastinate and put it off. Then it just makes so much sense to me that we should focus on our time, right? How are we controlling our days and managing our time moving forward? So I appreciate you connecting the dots. Before we let you go, do you want to share any websites or social media? Where do people check out you and your work if they're interested in learning more?
Sure. You can find me at truefocuscoaching.com. If you're interested in talking more with me about how I might be able to help you, you can apply for what I call a strategy session, which really is an hour that I help you get clear on your next best moves to manage your time and tasks in a way that works for you. It's no cost. I'm not selling anything. It's really me, my mind on you, and giving you some next actions. And if you want that, then you can go to truefocuscoaching.com/apply/. So it's truefocuscoaching.com/APPLY/.
And we will link to that in the show notes and whatnot. Last question or two before I let you go. You mentioned, is it Carol Dweck in Mindset, the book? Are there any other books, based on our conversation or otherwise, that you think people should check out that might help them improve their well-being or their time management or their mindset?
I think Carol Dweck is a great place to start in terms of that growth mindset, because I think that so many of us get stuck in perfectionism. We get stuck in how we think we're supposed to be. And I think that's a really good place to lean into, to start to just explore and locate, where you are. And then I think I'm just going to make it simple. Let's just leave it at that.
Cool. Perfect.
If you're interested in time management resources, on my website also, there's a resource section. We've got tons of blogs, tons of interviews I've done, all of that kind of stuff. Also
Perfect.
A good place to go.
And we'll spotlight that. And then kind of outside of the scope of time management or financial well-being, are there any habits or routines or things you kind of go back to take care of yourself or your mindset that you think are worthwhile for people to know about?
Absolutely. So I have a habit that I keep coming back to. I practice my own philosophy, which is restart, don't recreate. So you don't have to be perfect at any of this stuff. You just need to know what are the tools that help keep you tuned up and functioning at your best. So one of those for me is a gratitude journal, and I make it really simple and easy for myself. So when I'm having my cup of coffee in the morning, I have a notebook that's right where I sit. And I just write down 5 things that I'm grateful for. And it helps me remember the good places. It helps me lean into the positive thinking and the opportunities in my day. And also just to come from a place of gratitude, which we know scientifically helps us all feel better and do better in the world.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great tip. Thank you so much. That's a great place to end for being grateful. I'm grateful for your time and your expertise. It's been really impactful in my world, my life personally and professionally. So I appreciate that. And we'll look forward to chatting with you again sometime soon.
Thanks so much for having me, Jim. I can't wait to talk more.
All right. Take care.